My life in England was a real roller coaster life. My earliest memories are of my father taking me to the Crystal Palace, which burnt down in 1936. The next big event in my life, of course, was the Second World War, which I think brought about my love of aeroplanes. But as a child, I would say that the Second World War and those few years after the Second World War were probably the most exciting time of my life. We had no fear of the war as kids. We grew up as thinking it was the norm. Mum and Dad were obviously frightened for us, but kids were very adaptable and there was no fear in what was going on around us. Growing up watching the dogfights over London was a very exciting time. Dad used to be paranoid about us having to go down in the air raid shelter, but we could see nothing wrong with watching the dogfights happening. And I had a small fairy cycle, and if I could get away with it, I'd jump on my bike and I'd ride towards Croydon Aerodrome in particular, which was the closest of the aerodromes around us, where I could actually see what was going on and what they were fighting about. My father often used to scruff me by the back of the neck and throw the bike in his over his shoulder and drag me back home and toss me down in the air raid shelter. As a boy, this getting into models and building was primarily because I was lying on my back for so long in hospital. My mother used to send me kits. I started modelling aeroplanes. My first memory of modelling aeroplanes was a Lysander out of tissue paper and balsa wood. I made buses, race cars. I copied pictures out of books. I made them out of cornflakes packets, which I softened by chewing or sucking, and then I could shape them into the rounded shapes that I needed, let them dry and glued them together with balsa cement. That's really how I got into model aircraft. My first wife really didn't like the smell of the glue in the house, and I had a long break. I had something like a 30-year break from modelling. There was this thing about feeling selfish about doing this to amuse myself, and so I gave it away for a long, long time. What made me get back into modelling was the mere fact that I carried one model around Tasmania for something like 25, 30 years in a cornflake carton, and my new wife said to me one day, "What are you going to do with that box of rubbish?" And I said, "Oh, one day I'll finish it." And she said to me, "Well, why don't you?" So this is the end result. I got into it and finished it. It's never flown. It's a model I'm quite proud of, but it sits as a reminder of what might have been. I try to put as much detail as I can without getting too heavy, and also selecting the kind of detail that would be eye-catching or perhaps even breathtaking amongst other models. The trick is to trick the eye, to trick the judge, and to trick the other modelers into believing that you know everything you're doing and that you are the best. My passion to aeroplanes comes third after my wife and my son, but of course I do have the advantage of having a son that I believe is a very, very good model aircraft pilot and seems to have a natural ability to be able to take one of my aeroplanes and fly it. It gives me a great deal of satisfaction to stand back and see something that I've put together taken to the air with him at the controls. It's amazing when I look back now and think that all of the information I used to gather and look at and try to get together, and that I'd walk past a huge building with a huge computer in it, can now be packed into less than a mobile phone. It's just an amazing life, and I think I've had an extraordinary life. Lived at just the right time, I suppose.